Jake Martinez stood at the back of the crowd watching his fellow cadets line up for what everyone called Beast Week. The name made it sound fun, like some kind of festival. It wasn't fun at all. The Galactic Military Academy sat on a floating platform above the clouds of Nexus Prime. Through the massive windows, Jake could see 3 different suns casting strange shadows across the training grounds. He had been here for 8 months now, and he still wasn't used to the alien sky. Around him, cadets from 17 different worlds whispered in their native languages. The tall, bird-like Zara Kelleth clicked her beak nervously. Her feathers kept changing colors, a sure sign she was scared. Next to her, Crone Vex polished his chitinous armor plates. The insect-like alien never showed fear, but his antennae twitched constantly. "Attention, cadets!" Commander Voss's voice boomed across the chamber. The reptilian officer was 8 feet tall and covered in green scales that gleamed under the artificial lights. His yellow eyes swept over the assembled students. "Today you will face the Shadow Maw." Jake felt his stomach drop. Everyone knew about the Shadow Maw. It was the most dangerous creature in the Academy's containment facility. The beast had killed 3 handlers in the past year. Some cadets whispered that it had psychic powers, that it could read minds and drive people insane with fear. The commander continued speaking. "Each of you will approach the containment field. You will demonstrate proper protocol when facing a hostile alien life form. Those who show weakness will be removed from the program." The cadets were led through several corridors deep into the Academy's underground levels. The air grew colder as they descended. Jake could hear strange sounds echoing from behind thick metal doors. Growls, shrieks, and noises that had no name in any human language. They stopped in front of a massive chamber. Through reinforced glass, Jake could see the containment area. It was the size of a basketball court surrounded by crackling energy barriers. In the center of the space, something moved in the shadows. "Behold the Shadow Maw," Commander Voss announced. The creature stepped into the light, and several cadets gasped. It was 8 feet tall and built like a nightmare version of a wolf. Its fur was black as space, and its claws looked like they were carved from obsidian. But the most terrifying thing about it was its eyes. They glowed with an inner fire, and when they looked at you, it felt like they were seeing straight into your soul. The beast paced back and forth, its massive head swaying from side to side. Every few seconds, it would let out a low growl that made the floor vibrate. "The Shadow Maw is from the Kethvar system," the commander explained. "It is a predator of the highest order. Its kind has destroyed entire colonies. They are driven by pure instinct to kill and consume." Jake watched the creature move. There was something about the way it paced that reminded him of the tigers he had seen in zoos back on Earth. Those tigers had paced the same way, back and forth with no purpose except to move. "Cadet Vex will go first," Commander Voss announced. Crone Vex stepped forward with confidence. His 4 arms moved in perfect synchronization as he approached the containment field. The Shadow Maw immediately noticed him. Its head snapped up and it let out a snarl that made everyone take a step back. The beast charged toward the energy barrier, stopping just inches from Crone's face. It bared teeth the size of kitchen knives and roared. Saliva splattered against the invisible wall. Crone stood his ground, but Jake could see his antennae trembling. After 30 seconds, Crone stepped back. The Shadow Maw continued snarling and clawing at the barrier where he had stood. "Adequate," Commander Voss said. Next, one by one, the cadets approached the containment field. The reaction was always the same. The Shadow Maw would spot them, charge the barrier, and display every sign of wanting to tear them apart. The Krill warrior cadets, who came from a planet where fighting was considered art, couldn't get within 10 feet before the beast went crazy. The Mentari, who could read thoughts across vast distances, actually fainted when they tried to approach. Zara Kelleth was called up. Her colorful feathers had turned completely gray with fear, but she walked forward anyway. The Shadow Maw saw her coming and immediately went into attack mode. It slammed itself against the energy barrier so hard that sparks flew. Zara held her position for the required time, but Jake could see her shaking. More cadets went forward. The pattern never changed. Approach, snarl, rage, retreat. The Shadow Maw seemed to hate everyone equally. Finally, Commander Voss called Jake's name. Jake took a deep breath and walked forward. He could feel the eyes of every cadet on him. Being human at the Academy meant always being watched. Humans were the newest members of the Galactic Defense Coalition. Most of the other species still weren't sure what to make of them. As Jake approached the containment field, he noticed something strange. The Shadow Maw had stopped pacing. It stood perfectly still in the center of its enclosure, watching him. There was no snarling, no aggressive posturing. The creature just looked at him. Jake continued forward until he was standing right at the energy barrier. The Shadow Maw tilted its massive head to one side, studying him with those glowing eyes. Up close, Jake could see details that hadn't been visible from a distance. The creature's fur wasn't actually black, it was so dark blue it looked black. There were scars along its flanks, old wounds that had healed badly. Following the protocol he had been taught, Jake extended his hand toward the barrier. He expected the beast to charge, to snarl, to show the same aggression it had displayed to every other cadet. Instead, the Shadow Maw stepped forward slowly. Its massive head moved closer to the energy field, until its snout was almost touching the barrier at the exact spot where Jake's hand hovered. The creature's eyes never left Jake's face. Behind him, Jake could hear whispers starting among the other cadets. He could sense Commander Voss moving closer, probably wondering what was wrong with the containment system. But Jake knew nothing was wrong with the barriers. Something else was happening here. Something that had never happened before in the 300-year history of the Galactic Military Academy. The Shadow Maw wasn't snarling at him. It wasn't showing aggression or rage or hatred. If Jake didn't know better, he would say the creature looked curious. The silence in the chamber was complete. Jake could hear his own heartbeat echoing in his ears as he stood face to face with the Shadow Maw. The creature remained perfectly still, its glowing eyes fixed on his face. Its snout was pressed against the energy barrier directly opposite Jake's outstretched palm. "What is happening?" Commander Voss whispered to Dr. Elena Foster, the Academy's head of xenobiology. The doctor was frantically checking her scanner readings, her face pale with confusion. "I don't know," she whispered back. "The creature's bio readings are completely different from anything we've recorded before." Behind them, the other cadets had fallen silent. Even Kronvex, who usually had something to say about everything, stood with his mouth hanging open. Zara's feathers had shifted from gray to a confused pattern of blue and yellow stripes. Jake felt something he had never experienced before. It was like a gentle pressure in his mind, not painful or frightening, just present. The sensation reminded him of the feeling he got when his younger sister back on Earth was upset about something but trying to hide it. That same sense of someone nearby who needed help but didn't know how to ask for it. The Shadow Maw made a sound, but it wasn't a growl or a snarl. It was more like a whine, the kind of noise a dog might make when it wanted something. The creature's massive head tilted further to one side, and Jake could swear he saw intelligence in those glowing eyes. "Cadet Martinez," Commander Voss said quietly. "Step back slowly. Do not make any sudden movements." But Jake didn't step back. Something told him that would be wrong. Instead, he pressed his palm more firmly against the energy barrier. The Shadow Maw responded by pushing its snout harder against the field from the other side. "Sir?" Jake said without turning around. "I don't think it wants to hurt me." "That creature has killed 3 handlers," Commander Voss snapped. "It is a killing machine. Step away from the barrier immediately." Jake finally turned around. The gathered cadets and instructors were all staring at him with expressions ranging from amazement to terror. "With respect, sir, when did those handlers die?" Dr. Foster checked her tablet. "The first was killed 18 months ago, the second 14 months ago, and the third 8 months ago." "What were they doing when they were killed?" Jake asked. The doctor's frown deepened as she scrolled through the files. They were using shock prods to move the creature from one containment cell to another. Jake turned back to the Shadow Maw. The creature was still watching him, but now it had settled down into a sitting position. It looked almost like a giant dog waiting for its owner to come home from work. "Maybe it wasn't being aggressive," Jake said. "Maybe it was defending itself." "Preposterous," Kronvex interrupted. "The creature is a predator. Predators kill. It is their nature." "Humans are predators too," Jake replied. "We hunted mammoths and saber-toothed tigers with nothing but sticks and stones. But we also domesticated wolves and turned them into dogs. Maybe being a predator doesn't automatically make something evil." Commander Voss was clearly struggling with what he was seeing. In all his years at the Academy, nothing like this had ever happened. The protocols were clear. Hostile alien life forms remained hostile. They could be contained, studied, and used for training, but they could never be trusted. The barrier stays up, he decided. Cadet Martinez, you will return to your position with the others. Jake looked back at the Shadow Maw one more time. The creature's eyes followed his movement, and when Jake started to walk away, it stood up again and moved closer to the barrier. The whining sound came again, louder this time. It doesn't want me to leave, Jake said. Dr. Foster was staring at her readings in disbelief. Commander, you need to see this. The creature's stress hormones have dropped to almost nothing. Its heart rate is down 40% from normal. And these brainwave patterns. She paused, checking the readings again. I've never seen anything like this in a Shadow Maw. What do the patterns indicate? Commander Voss asked. If I had to guess, I'd say the creature is calm, maybe even content. The commander's scaled face showed his frustration. Everything he knew about xenobiology and military protocol told him this was impossible. Shadow Maws were killing machines. They had destroyed entire outposts. They could not be reasoned with or tamed, but the evidence was right in front of him. The creature that had spent months snarling and raging at everything that came near it was now sitting peacefully, watching a human cadet with what looked remarkably like affection. We will continue this examination tomorrow, Commander Voss announced. All cadets return to your quarters. Dr. Foster, you will conduct a full analysis of today's events. As the group began to file out of the chamber, Jake took one last look at the Shadow Maw. The creature had stood up and was pressing itself against the barrier again, watching Jake leave. The whining sound it made was soft but clear. Zara fell into step beside Jake as they walked back through the corridors. Her feathers had settled into a curious pattern of green and blue. Jake, she said quietly, what did you feel in there, when you were close to it? Jake thought about how to explain the sensation. It felt like, have you ever found an injured animal? Back on your homeworld? Zara nodded. Her people were natural flyers, and she had often rescued smaller birds that had fallen from their nests. It felt like that, Jake continued, like something that was hurt and scared but trying to be brave. And lonely. Really, really lonely. They walked in silence for a while. Finally, Zara spoke again. The way it looked at you, it was like it recognized you, like it had been waiting for you. Jake didn't answer, but he was thinking the same thing. The Shadow Maw hadn't just been calm around him. It had seemed almost relieved, as if seeing Jake had solved some problem that had been bothering it for a long time. That night, Jake lay in his narrow academy bunk, staring at the ceiling. Outside his window, the three suns of Nexus Prime were setting, casting strange colored shadows across his room. He thought about the Shadow Maw sitting alone in its containment cell, probably pacing again now that Jake was gone. He thought about the stories he had heard about Earth's early history. When humans first started domesticating animals, the wolves that became dogs, the wild horses that became partners, the cats that decided to live with humans because it was easier than hunting alone. Maybe the problem wasn't that some alien species were naturally hostile. Maybe the problem was that nobody had ever tried to understand what they actually wanted. Jake fell asleep thinking about glowing eyes and the soft sound of whining that seemed to say, "Please don't leave me alone again." Jake wasn't supposed to be in the lower levels of the academy at night. The containment area was off limits to cadets after evening meal, but he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the Shadow Maw's face and heard that soft whining sound. The corridors were dimly lit by emergency lighting, casting long shadows on the metal walls. Jake moved quietly, his soft-soled boots making almost no sound on the floor. He had memorized the path during the day's exercise, and he found the observation chamber without any trouble. The containment area was darker at night, but Jake could still see the Shadow Maw through the reinforced glass. The creature was pacing again, just like it had been before their encounter, back and forth with no purpose except movement. Jake pressed his hand against the glass. He was too far away for the creature to sense him, but something made the Shadow Maw stop pacing. Its massive head turned toward the observation window, and those glowing eyes found Jake immediately. The creature moved to the energy barrier closest to where Jake stood. It sat down and tilted its head, watching him. Even through the glass and across the distance, Jake could feel that same gentle pressure in his mind. "I thought I might find you here." Jake spun around to find Dr. Foster standing in the doorway. The xenobiology specialist looked tired, but not angry. "I'm sorry, Doctor. I know I'm not supposed to be here. I just couldn't sleep." Dr. Foster stepped into the room and looked through the glass at the shadow maw. Neither could I. I've been reviewing the data from this afternoon for 6 hours. Nothing makes sense. She activated a wall screen and pulled up the shadow maw's vital readings from the day. Look at this. For 8 months, this creature's stress levels have been off the charts. Heart rate consistently elevated. Cortisol levels through the roof. Brainwave patterns indicating constant agitation. The graph showed wild spikes and valleys, like a seismograph during an earthquake. But then you appeared, Dr. Foster continued, switching to the readings from Jake's encounter. Everything changed. Look at these numbers. The new graph was almost flat, steady, calm, normal. It's like someone gave the creature a powerful sedative, Dr. Foster said. But we didn't. The only variable that changed was you. Jake looked back at the shadow maw. The creature was still sitting by the barrier watching them. Dr. Foster, can I ask you something? What do you know about how shadow maws live in the wild? The doctor pulled up another file. They're pack hunters from the HFY system. Highly intelligent, excellent communicators within their own species. They hunt in coordinated groups and have complex social structures. Social structures, Jake repeated. So they're not supposed to be alone. Well, no. In the wild, they live in groups of 10 to 15 individuals. They form strong bonds with their packmates, and Dr. Foster stopped talking as the implications hit her. How long has this one been in captivity? Jake asked. Dr. Foster checked her files. 12 years. It was captured as a juvenile during a raid on a HFY outpost. 12 years alone, Jake said quietly. No wonder it's been pacing. The doctor stared at the readings on her screen. You're suggesting that the creature's aggression isn't natural behavior, that it's a psychological response to isolation. I'm not suggesting anything, Jake said. I'm just asking questions. Back on Earth, we learned a long time ago that putting social animals in solitary confinement drives them crazy. Dogs, horses, even humans. We all need companionship. Dr. Foster was quiet for a long moment. The incident reports from the handler deaths. They all occurred when someone was trying to force the creature to move to a smaller isolation cell for medical procedures. So it was defending itself, Jake said, not hunting. Not being naturally aggressive. Just trying to avoid being locked up alone again. The doctor looked through the glass at the shadow maw. The creature had moved closer to the barrier, as if it was trying to get as close to the humans as possible. Jake, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. When you were standing near the barrier today, did you feel anything unusual? Jake hesitated. He wasn't sure how to explain what he had experienced without sounding crazy. It was like, have you ever been around someone who was really sad but trying to hide it? That feeling where you can just tell something is wrong? Empathy, Dr. Foster said. You were picking up on the creature's emotional state. Is that possible? I mean, between different species? Dr. Foster pulled up another screen, this one showing comparative brain scans. Human brains have unusually developed mirror neuron systems compared to most galactic species. Mirror neurons fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing the same action. They're believed to be the biological basis for empathy. She pointed to different areas of the brain scans. Look at this. Human mirror neuron activity is 3 times higher than the galactic average. You're literally wired to understand and respond to the emotional states of other beings. Jake looked back at the shadow maw. The creature had lain down now, but its eyes never left the observation window. So when I felt its loneliness, you were actually sensing its emotional state, Dr. Foster confirmed. The question is, why doesn't this work with other species? We've had hundreds of cadets from dozens of worlds interact with the shadow maw. You're the first to get this reaction. Jake thought about it. Maybe it's not just about sensing emotions. Maybe it's about what you do with that information. What do you mean? When Crone approached the barrier, what was his body language like? Dr. Foster pulled up the security footage from the day's exercise. On the screen, they watched Crone Vex approach the containment field with perfect military posture. His movements were precise, controlled, dominant. He looks like a predator approaching prey, Jake observed, or a rival moving into another animal's territory. They watched footage of the other cadets. Each one approached with similar body language, confident, aggressive, ready for a fight. Now watch me, Jake said. Dr. Foster switched to Jake's approach. The difference was immediately obvious. Jake's movements were calm, non-threatening. He didn't try to dominate or intimidate. He approached like someone meeting a friend, not an enemy. You approached it like an equal, Dr. Foster said. Not as a superior trying to control it and not as prey trying to avoid being eaten. You treated it like another intelligent being. Because that's what it is, Jake said simply. Dr. Foster stared at the data for a long time. Jake, I think you may have just revolutionized our understanding of interspecies contact. If you're right, then most of our hostile encounters with alien species might be misunderstandings. We approach them as either threats to be neutralized or resources to be controlled. We never approach them as equals to be understood. The Shadow Maw had closed its eyes, but Jake could tell it wasn't really sleeping. It was just resting, comfortable for the first time in months because it knew it wasn't alone. Dr. Foster, Jake said, what would happen if I tried to make actual contact with it? Not just standing at the barrier, but really communicating? The doctor looked at him with a mixture of excitement and terror. That would be completely against protocol, dangerous, unprecedented. Jake smiled. But you want to try it too, don't you? Dr. Foster was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled up the duty roster on her tablet. Commander Voss is in meetings with the Academy Board all day tomorrow. If we were to conduct an unauthorized experiment during that time, no one would know unless something went wrong. Jake finished. They both looked through the glass at the Shadow Maw. The creature had opened its eyes again and was watching them with what looked remarkably like hope. This is either going to be the greatest breakthrough in galactic relations history, Dr. Foster said, or it's going to get us both expelled from the Academy. Jake pressed his hand against the glass one more time. The Shadow Maw stood up and moved to the barrier, pressing its snout against the energy field in the exact spot where Jake's hand would be if the wall wasn't there. Some things are worth the risk, Jake said. The next afternoon, Jake stood outside the containment chamber with Dr. Foster and 3 security guards. His heart was pounding, but not from fear of the Shadow Maw. He was more worried about what would happen if Commander Voss found out what they were doing. The barrier will only be lowered for 60 seconds, Dr. Foster explained for the 3rd time. If the creature shows any signs of aggression, we raise it immediately. The security team has tranquilizer weapons ready. Jake nodded, but he wasn't really listening. Through the glass, he could see the Shadow Maw pacing excitedly. The creature seemed to know something was different today. Its movements were more energetic, less like the desperate pacing of a caged animal and more like a dog that knew its owner was coming home. Jake, Dr. Foster said, placing a hand on his shoulder, I need you to understand something. If this goes wrong, it's not just your life at risk. If the Shadow Maw hurts you, it will be destroyed, and any chance of changing how we handle interspecies contact will be lost forever. I understand, Jake said. But Dr. Foster, look at the readings. She glanced at her scanner. The Shadow Maw's vital signs were the calmest they had been in 12 years. I know. That's the only reason I'm allowing this. They entered the containment chamber through a separate airlock. Jake could hear the hum of the energy barriers and feel the slight tingle in the air from the high-powered force fields. The Shadow Maw was standing at the far end of its enclosure, watching every move Jake made, lowering barrier in 3, 2, 1. The energy field flickered and disappeared. For a moment, nothing happened. Jake and the Shadow Maw simply looked at each other across 10 feet of empty space. Then slowly, the creature began to move forward. Jake fought every instinct that told him to run. The Shadow Maw was even more impressive without the barrier between them. It was massive, easily 8 feet tall and probably weighing close to 1,000 pounds. Its claws clicked on the metal floor with each step, but there was nothing aggressive about its approach. The creature moved carefully, almost hesitantly, like it was afraid Jake might disappear if it moved too quickly. When the Shadow Maw was 3 feet away, it stopped and sat down. Up close, Jake could see details he had missed before. The creature's fur wasn't actually fur at all, but something more like flexible scales that gave the impression of fur. Its eyes were definitely intelligent. Not the blank stare of a mindless predator, but the focused attention of a thinking being. Jake slowly extended his hand. The Shadow Maw leaned forward and gently pressed its snout against Jake's palm. Its skin was warm and surprisingly soft. That's when Jake felt it. Not just the gentle pressure in his mind he had experienced before, but actual communication. It wasn't words or images, but pure emotion and meaning flowing directly into his thoughts. Loneliness. Years and years of crushing loneliness. The memory of others like itself lost and never found again. The confusion of being in a place with strange smells and sounds and no one who understood. The fear that came with every visit from handlers who brought pain and restraint. and underneath it all, a desperate hope that someday, someone would understand. Jake's eyes filled with tears. He had never experienced anything like this kind of direct emotional contact. It was overwhelming and beautiful and heartbreaking all at once. "It's okay," he whispered to the creature. "I understand. You've been alone, but you're not alone anymore." The shadow maw made a soft rumbling sound, almost like a cat purring. It pressed closer to Jake, and he could feel its gratitude washing over him in waves. "Dr. Foster?" Jake called without turning around. "You need to see this." The doctor approached carefully, her scanner in hand. "Jake, the creature's brain activity is off the charts, but not in an aggressive way. It's showing patterns I've never seen in any species. And yours?" She paused, staring at the readings. "Jake, your brain is synchronizing with its. You're actually sharing the same neural frequencies." Jake reached up and gently touched the shadow maw's massive head. The creature leaned into the contact, and Jake felt another wave of communication. Images flashed through his mind. Not his own memories, but the shadow maws. He saw vast forests under alien stars, where creatures like this one ran in coordinated packs. He felt the joy of the hunt not for killing, but for the cooperation and teamwork it required. He experienced the deep bonds between pack members, relationships that lasted lifetimes, and he saw the day it was all taken away. The attack on the pack's territory, the separation from family and friends, the long, lonely years in captivity. "Storm," Jake said suddenly. Dr. Foster looked confused. "What?" "Its name is Storm. That's what its pack called it." Jake looked into the creature's glowing eyes. "That's your name, isn't it?" "Storm." The shadow maw, Storm, made a sound that was almost like a sigh of relief. Jake realized that no one had used its name in 12 years. To everyone else, it was just the shadow maw or the creature or the subject. "Storm," Jake repeated, and the creature pressed its head more firmly against his hand. Dr. Foster was frantically taking readings. "Jake, this is incredible. The creature is responding to vocal communication. But more than that, it's showing complex emotional responses to being acknowledged as an individual rather than just a species." Jake felt Storm's attention shift to something else, a memory that made the creature suddenly tense. Through their connection, Jake saw flashes of the handlers who had been killed, but he saw them from Storm's perspective, men with shock prods and restraint devices, forcing Storm into smaller and smaller cages. The panic of being trapped in spaces too small to move, the desperate need to escape, to find space to breathe, the moments when fear turned to defensive violence, when Storm lashed out not to hunt or kill, but simply to avoid being crushed in claustrophobic containers. It wasn't aggression, Jake said to Dr. Foster. When it killed those handlers, it wasn't hunting them. It was having panic attacks. It was like someone with claustrophobia being forced into a closet. Dr. Foster checked her historical records. The incidents all occurred during transfers to smaller containment cells for medical procedures. "Storm," Jake said gently, "no one is going to force you into small spaces anymore. I promise." The creature's relief was so strong that Jake staggered. Through their connection, he felt Storm's understanding that Jake wasn't just making empty sounds, but actually communicating. For the first time in 12 years, someone was talking to Storm instead of at it. "Time," called one of the security guards. Dr. Foster reluctantly activated the barrier. As the energy field flickered back to life, Storm stepped back but didn't retreat to the far end of the enclosure. It sat down right next to the barrier, as close to Jake as it could get. "I'll come back tomorrow," Jake promised, "and the day after that. You're not alone anymore." As they left the containment chamber, Dr. Foster was practically vibrating with excitement. "Jake, do you realize what this means? If humans can establish this kind of communication with species we've classified as hostile, it could change everything. Every first contact, every diplomatic mission, every conflict zone." Jake was thinking about something else Storm had shared with him. The knowledge that there were others like it scattered across the galaxy. Other creatures that had been captured and isolated, driven to aggression by loneliness and misunderstanding. "Dr. Foster," he said, "how many other hostile species does the Academy have in containment?" She checked her tablet. 17 different species, 43 individual creatures. "I think Storm wants to help me talk to them." Dr. Foster stopped walking. "Jake, that would be the most dangerous experiment in the history of interspecies contact." Jake smiled. Some things are worth the risk. 3 weeks later, Jake stood in front of the most dangerous containment cell in the academy. Behind him, Storm waited patiently, no longer confined but wearing a simple collar that allowed him to move freely through the facility. The change in both their lives had been dramatic and swift. Commander Voss had been furious when he discovered Jake's unauthorized contact with Storm. But when Dr. Foster presented the data showing unprecedented breakthroughs in interspecies communication, the Academy Board had overruled him. Jake was given special permission to continue his work, and Storm was reclassified from hostile specimen to diplomatic partner. Now they faced their biggest challenge yet, the Voidstalker. The creature in the maximum security cell was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It was roughly humanoid in shape but seemed to be made of living shadow. Its form shifted constantly, sometimes solid, sometimes translucent. When it moved, reality seemed to bend around it, creating ripples in the air like heat waves. 17 outposts destroyed. Dr. Foster read from her files. Hundreds of casualties. No successful communication attempts. It's been in containment for 6 months, and we still don't understand how it functions biologically. Jake approached the reinforced barrier slowly. Storm stayed close beside him, providing emotional support through their mental link. The Shadow Maw had become Jake's interpreter, helping him understand the subtle emotional currents that different species communicated through. The Voidstalker noticed their approach immediately. Its shifting form solidified into something more recognizably humanoid, and Jake could see what might have been eyes focusing on him. Unlike with Storm, Jake felt no immediate emotional connection. The creature's mind seemed to exist on a completely different frequency. It's not hostile, Jake said after several minutes of observation, but it's not calm either. It's afraid? No, that's not right. Storm made a low rumbling sound, and Jake felt a surge of information through their bond. The Shadow Maw was picking up on something Jake couldn't sense directly. Protective, Jake said suddenly. It's not afraid for itself. It's worried about something else. Dr. Foster checked her readings. The creature's energy patterns are definitely agitated, but you're right. It's not the same kind of aggression we see in trapped predators. Jake pressed his hand against the barrier. The Voidstalker's form shifted, and suddenly Jake felt it. Not a direct mental connection like he had with Storm, but something deeper. Images flashed through his mind, but they weren't memories. They were more like maps or diagrams, showing star systems and orbital patterns. It's trying to show me something, Jake said. Star charts, I think, or... No, not charts, territories. More images flowed through the connection. Jake saw vast nursery grounds in deep space, places where young Voidstalkers developed over centuries in the cosmic void between stars. He saw the slow, careful patterns they followed to protect these areas from any disturbance. And he saw Galactic Defense Coalition ships, unknowingly building outposts directly in the paths of these ancient migration routes. Oh my God, Jake whispered. Dr. Foster, the outpost attacks. They weren't random acts of aggression. The Coalition was building bases in their nursery grounds. Dr. Foster pulled up galactic maps on her tablet. Show me where. Jake pointed to several locations where outposts had been destroyed. There, and there. Those aren't strategic military positions. They're breeding grounds that have been used for thousands of years. The Voidstalker's form shifted again, and Jake felt a wave of desperate urgency. Through the connection, he sensed that there were dozens of Coalition bases currently being built in areas that would be needed for the next breeding cycle. It's not a warrior, Jake realized. It's a parent, and it's trying to protect its children. Dr. Foster was frantically cross-referencing construction schedules with the locations Jake had identified. Jake, there are 3 new outposts scheduled to go online in those coordinates next month. If you're right, there's going to be another war, Jake finished, and both sides will think the other one started it. The Voidstalker seemed to sense that Jake understood. Its form became more solid, more clearly defined. For the first time since its capture, it wasn't trying to escape or fighting against its containment. It was waiting to see what Jake would do with the knowledge it had shared. We have to tell Commander Voss, Dr. Foster said, and the Coalition High Command. If we can prevent those bases from being built, they won't listen, Jake said. They'll think it's some kind of trick. A hostile alien manipulating us into revealing Coalition defense plans. Storm pressed against Jake's side, offering comfort and support. Through their bond, Jake felt the Shadow Maw's confidence in him. Storm had learned to trust Jake's judgment, and now that trust was being returned. "What if we proved it?" Jake said. "What if we could establish real communication with the Voidstalker? Show the Coalition that these creatures are intelligent, that they're trying to protect something precious?" Dr. Foster looked at the containment setup. "Jake, direct contact with the Voidstalker. We don't even know if it's safe to breathe the same air. Its biology is completely unknown." "But Storm could help," Jake said. "He can sense things I can't. And if the Voidstalker really is trying to communicate, maybe the three of us together can figure out how." It took 2 days to get approval for the experiment. Commander Voss argued against it, but when Dr. Foster explained the potential implications of Jake's discovery, the Academy board voted to proceed. The stakes were too high to ignore. The containment barrier flickered and disappeared. Jake stepped into the cell with Storm at his side, both of them protected by emergency force field generators that could activate in milliseconds if needed. The Voidstalker didn't move toward them. Instead, it extended what might have been a hand, fingers made of shifting shadow reaching toward Jake. When Jake reached back, their fingertips touched. The connection was unlike anything Jake had experienced. Where Storm's mind felt warm and emotional, the Voidstalker's consciousness was vast and cool, like floating in deep space. But it was also gentle, careful not to overwhelm Jake with information he couldn't process. Images flowed between them, not just star charts now, but culture and history. Jake saw the slow, patient way Voidstalkers lived, taking centuries to make decisions, building relationships that lasted millennia. He felt their deep love for their children and their profound respect for the cosmic forces that shaped the universe. And he felt their confusion and grief over the conflicts with the Coalition. They couldn't understand why these small, quick-lived beings were so aggressive, so eager to build and expand and claim territory that belonged to no one. "They don't want to fight," Jake said to Dr. Foster. "They never wanted to fight. They just want to protect their children and continue the patterns their people have followed for millions of years." Through the connection, Jake shared his own understanding of human and Coalition culture. He showed the Voidstalker how quickly humans lived, how their short lifespans made them eager to build and expand. He shared the concept of misunderstanding, of two sides fighting because they couldn't communicate. The Voidstalker's response was immediate and powerful. Through their link, Jake felt its willingness to try to bridge the gap between their peoples. It shared detailed information about Voidstalker territories, migration patterns, and breeding cycles. More importantly, it shared the location of other Voidstalkers who could serve as ambassadors. When the connection ended, Jake felt emotionally drained but hopeful. The Voidstalker had returned to its shifting, semi-corporeal state, but it was no longer trying to escape. "It was waiting, Dr. Foster," Jake said. "I think we just prevented a war." 6 months later, Jake stood on the bridge of the Coalition ship Harmony's Edge, watching the first official diplomatic meeting between the Coalition and the Voidstalker Assembly. Storm was beside him, as always, and in the ship's specially designed containment areas, representatives from a dozen species that had once been classified as hostile were preparing for their own first contacts. The meeting was taking place in deep space, far from any planetary systems or territorial claims. The Voidstalkers had sent 3 representatives, their forms shifting gently in the zero gravity of the conference chamber. "Translation successful," reported the ship's communication officer. "Both sides have agreed to the territorial boundaries Jake proposed." Jake smiled, thinking about how much had changed since that first day in the Academy's containment chamber. What had started as a simple training exercise had become the foundation for a new understanding of galactic relations. Storm rumbled softly beside him, and through their bond, Jake felt the Shadowmaw's satisfaction. Storm's pack instincts were fulfilled now, not just by his bond with Jake, but by the growing network of humans and aliens working together to build understanding instead of barriers. Commander Voss approached, his reptilian features showing grudging respect. Ambassador Martinez. The Coalition High Command has approved your proposal for the Interspecies Communication Corps. You'll have full diplomatic authority and unlimited resources." Jake nodded his thanks, but his attention was focused on the meeting taking place in the chamber below. Humans and Voidstalkers were,